guys, I'm Complexity QXC. Today I'm going to be taking a look at the newest maps announced for Season 2 of 2014. These will be the 1v1 maps only, because. Along with the 4 additional maps that they've added, they've also removed 4 maps. Before I go into game and actually kind of walk through each of these maps with you, I'm going to just show you a little picture, talk a little bit about some of the main features of the maps. So let's do that right now. So 4 maps that are removed: Polar Night, Yunsu, Daedalus Point, and Heavy Rain. Probably the only one of these that I'm sad to see go is Heavy Rain. Polar Night I think is a pretty good map, but it has been around for a long time. Same with Yunsu. Daedalus Point I think is a bad map, and I'm glad that they're removing it. 4 new maps. First one is King Sejong Station. If you've been watching Pro League at all, you've seen this map quite a bit. So 2-player map, 1 player spawns here, another player spawns there. Natural third. Notable things: there's a small like 2-step cliff into the main here and here. That allows a second point of entry for Reapers, and also kind of an intermediate dropping point, mostly relevant for Terran. The natural has 2 entrances, but one of them is blocked off by rocks. And besides that, most of the action is taking place in this part of the map until players get large enough armies that they can actually break these rocks down and start threatening multiple alleys. The next map is Overgrowth, 2-player GSL map. 1 player starts up here, another here. See the natural with a relatively small choke point. Perhaps it's hard to see scale on these pictures, but we'll see when we get into the game itself. 2 potential third bases. Looks like could be relatively easy to take a 4th, depending on how exactly it plays out. And actually, it has a gold base, which looks like it's well designed in that it's one of the hardest bases to hold. Anything with minerals at the edge of a cliff is particularly difficult to defend. Third map here is MerryGoRound, which is a 3-player map that looks like it utilizes force fields. Is it? Well, we'll see when we get into the map. Probably the most interesting part, besides being a 3-player map, is these raised expansions in the center. Plus the watchtower, which probably illuminates all 3. It's going to lead to, so you have 1, 2, 3, kind of, one of these is your 4th base, and then the 5th base is going to be one of these center ones. So you're forced to expand towards your opponent, which should lead to a lot of conflict and hopefully some interesting games. And the 4th map is Waystation. Waystation is a 4-player map, but only cross-diagonal spawns are enabled. So you spawn here, your opponent spawns there. You spawn here, your opponent spawns there. And it looks like the bases are relatively similar, main natural, but perhaps going on to a 3rd and a 4th, it'll be different. And also, these 2 center spawns give you much closer access to the island. So pretty unique map. But enough with pictures. Let's jump into game and let's start taking a look at them. That's not what I meant to do. Okay, that is what I meant to do. So this is King Sejong Station. And as mentioned, this is kind of where the cliff jump-in point. These are the rocks for your natural. And this is a pretty dangerous spot when you're playing against Terran because of the threat of siege tanks here. Especially in TVT, siege tanks here, elevator up, or if you go all the way around here, siege tanks on this low ground, elevator into the main. Pretty strong. And kind of the same thing on this side. In general, so this is almost certainly always your 3rd base. And then from there, this could be a 4th base. This is like the 4th base for Terran or Protoss, and this is probably more the 4th base for Zerg, since Zerg generally wants to keep their expansions away from their opponent as much as possible, whereas Terran and Protoss are often expanding towards their opponent, depending on the matchup. Besides that, you've got these 2 watchtowers. which help to basically take away or provide vision of this major pathway as well as this back path. So this is nothing. That's just decorative mountains. But there's a whole system of pathways to traverse that don't utilize the center area. So you can see this is the ramp up. You get high ground over this base, control of the watchtower, and if you destroy these rocks, I don't know why there are rocks here. I understand these, but anyway, if you destroy this rock, then all of a sudden this pathway will take you basically right to your opponent's natural. So probably most relevant with Zerg is that they're going to want to destroy these rocks pretty quickly on so that they can have more flanking paths with their speedlings, more ways to set up their banelings. And also, this kind of stuff is great terrain for Terran. So if you have a drop out here, you pick it up, you land it here, you land it there, and now the ground army of Zerg or Protoss can't get to you as easily, and the drop is safer. Okay, so I don't think this is passable terrain. I'm not going to spend the time here to look at it because it's not really important for the map. But these back paths could be. Anyway, most of the actions usually centered in this, well, center area, right around here. If you can control this space, that gives you decent control over the second entrance to your base as well as to your expansions. For a Zerg player, it's going to be more like controlling here. Other notable things, not really a blink map, and not really a Reaper map either, with relatively limited entries into the main and natural. No, I'm not sure I would agree with that. I think you could do blink here. You've got a big ramp, and you've got an entrance on this side. And depending on how, you probably wouldn't have time to break the rocks with 2-base blink, but you could certainly blink up on this way. So a little bit more of a gamble, but could be a thing. The next map that we're going to jump into in-game and actually take a look at is Overgrowth. That'll take me just a moment to get up and going. So one of the most not important, one of the reasons or justifications that Blizzard used for which maps they removed and which maps they put in have to do with the prevalence of massive amounts of blink play in Protoss versus Terran. And this is kind of an effort to deter some of that. Definitely removing Heavy Rain, Daedalus, Yunsu, Polar Knight, those were all huge blink maps, so that seems reasonable as for their intentions. And we'll just have to see how these new maps play out. And what was I doing? I know what I was doing. Alright. And let's go in game. So, here we are on Overgrowth. So, main, not a Reaper map at all, really. You can see that there is no entrance really at all over here. This is not a blink map either. And the natural with a relatively normal choke point, not too big, not too small. And which leads to the third, which is here. The third does noted has 2 entrances, one there and one through here. And the natural, well, not the natural itself, but leading into the natural, there's also eventually 3 entrances, one through the third, one through these rocks, and one to the natural. And that means that holding 3 bases could be pretty tough because the attacks can come from such a wide range. So you have this huge concave, and if your opponent controls this space, you won't be able to hold on to your third. It reminds me a little bit of Whirlwind, actually, in that regard. Meanwhile, let's go take a look at the watchtowers and see what we can see. Oh yeah, and there's also a gold base. Notice that the gold base is almost revealed by the watchtower, not quite. But it is right at the edge of a cliff, which means that it's extremely easy to deny an attack from the low ground. It's also not a base you would take early on at all. 1, 2, 3, maybe a fourth base, but in a lot of cases you might take this as your fourth. Which is not usually how we see these bases done when they're done well. Dual Site had it as kind of a fourth base, and Antigua's Shipyard also kind of had it as a fourth base. But that's been a long time. That's been, I don't know how long it's been. And this seems particularly relevant for Terran, who's often starving around when they're trying to take a fourth base, and is also very mineral dependent. I could see this being an excellent Terran versus Zerg map, just because as soon as you land that fourth base, you're getting an extra surge of minerals that you don't normally see. Besides that, there's a lot of potential for Hellion run-bys up this choke, and perhaps this one. And it looks like if you control both the watchtowers, you control almost all the vision, almost all the ground vision of the map. And let's jump back to the watchtower. So there's a little bit here where it looks like units could sneak by depending on how fat they are. But there's still like this big column of airspace. But this is definitely going to be a very easy map to establish control on, and a hard map to retake that control, because a unit at the watchtower here, here, and a unit in each of these drop lanes, and you can basically see anything that can come onto your side of the map. Yeah, let's just take a look here, see what's jumpable. Okay, so not as bad as I had thought. I wasn't sure if those gutter and like beaks or whatever were jumpable. This isn't jumpable, is it? No. Okay. And that is Overgrowth. Nice different map. Looks like the one thing that I'm liking so far about these maps is that they're not super simple. But at the same time, they're also not overly complex. So a map like, I don't know if you know this map, Neo-Arkanoid has layers upon layers of destructible rocks. It's got neutral creep that blocks your expansions, and the destructible rocks are on a timer. It's an incredibly complicated map that requires like its own entire set of builds and whatnot, which is perhaps a little much for ladder maps. But these maps aren't like that. But they're also not quite as boring as something like, I would say Daedalus Point is probably one of the most boring maps we've had recently, where there's really not like a whole lot of features. It's just like there are expansions and then there's a big wide open area and you fight. And that's not super exciting either. Anyway, enough of that. Let's jump into MerryGoRound, which is the only 3-player map in the map pool. So here's my main. You have a gigantic main, which means it's probably going to be quite good for drops. As far as blink goes, I'm not really sure I agree that this map is... I think you could threaten the front here, pull back and blink into the main, and the Terran army would have to swing around. Well, anyway, let's see what other notable. Let's take an SCV and go poke around. You can see the ramp is large, but they at least added the this little bit of destructible debris here to hopefully make wall-offs and forge expands, things like that, a little bit easier, a little bit nicer to deal with. And your third, let's see, is this your third or is this your third? Your third is far away. This seems like it's going to be a very difficult map for Zerg against Terran or just Zerg in general. Your third is incredibly far away. Although you might be able to spread creep to this third from your main, which perhaps would be okay. this might be the third that you want to take, because it makes taking this as your fourth way easier. Also, one thing to note here is, even though this is a raised platform, there's enough distance here that basically the only units that are going to be able to attack SCVs mining this will be Colossus and Siege Tanks from the low ground. But I don't see how you could comfortably take 1, 2, 3, 4 bases. I guess this is more of like an anti-drop and harass, so you dedicate some units right here, and then the bulk of your army is controlling the watchtower, which we're going to send an SCV over to take a look at that. This will probably be the third that Terrans take. Is there another? Yeah, so there's a ramp here. Oh, okay. So I guess you could take... It'll probably depend more on your opponent's spawn in the matchup than anything else, because if the if anyone takes this third, then this is the fourth that they're going to take. And if your opponent spawned here, basically your fourth base is going to be very close to this expansion, which would potentially be forcing your opponent to expand this way, over up here. One thing also to note is this map has the force fields, so we can see exactly how that works. I think these are force fields. We'll see. Yeah. And basically the way that works is it takes away all this dead space and makes it unflyable terrain. And what that does is kind of twofold. One, you can't have just mutas sitting out here or medevacs just sitting and waiting. Your main is much more easy to defend against air units. There's not a lot of dead space in the back where they can kind of go. There's a little bit of dead space here, but overall there's not... I don't even know if there's enough dead space for a Terran to force a draw on this map. Maybe here, and its symmetric relatives around the map. That's kind of cool. Anyway, we're going to go into the fourth and final map just a moment here, which is Way Station. And this is perhaps the most interesting one because it's got two unique, mutually exclusive set of spawns. But whenever there's a new map, probably the most important thing to consider is what route you're going to expand. Your main is given to you. Your natural is usually straightforward. But then it's, what is my third? What is my fourth? What is my fifth? What path do I want to take? And how does that affect my strategy? And let's go into Way Station here. Alright, so this is the main. Again, you can see not a Reaper map, really. There's not like that big dead space where you can jump in. And definitely hard. This is probably the least blink friendly map of all the ones that we've looked at so far. Since there's basically not... This is a pretty tough blink because you have to do it like little by little. It's like 1 blinks, then 2, then 3, then whatever. But it's got a huge natural. This is super hard to wall off. And there's no ramp going up to the natural, which means that certain timings, ground-based timings, that maybe rely on that wall off are going to be much more effective. Beyond that, you have the third, which is probably this base. Let's take an SCV and control the watchtowers. Let's see what we can see. So this is probably the third base, which means creep spread kind of out to here if you're a Zerg player. And as a Terran player, this might be nice because you can depot wall off the top of the ramp or the bottom with a bunker. And this could be a third base. This one might make a little more sense because the fourth base is so close, whereas the third base into this fourth base is much more of a jump. So this is probably more of a fifth base.
I think it may cause bad edges further down.
Oh yeah, and also it has an island. 2 islands. Which is pretty interesting. Which, they don't look... As far as I know, they're not blocked by anything. But we can check that. We'll just float the command center over there.
Yeah.
And see if... Because this actually could be a spot you could expand to as a Terran player.
Yeah, so that was looking at the total cost of the tree instead of just a bundle.
Also, the other 2 spawns are this base and this base. So let's take a look at the alternate spawn. It's a huge main. Pretty easy natural. And actually a smaller choke point, I think. It might be an optical illusion, but I'm pretty sure that this is smaller. And a much more easily taken 3rd base, which very naturally goes into this 4th base. So it looks like the map will play out pretty differently based on the spawns.
So,
and also this spawn lends itself much better to taking this this island base. Yeah, that's about it. It's been a map preview with QXC, getting ready for Season 2 of 2014. I look forward to it. We'll have to see exactly how these maps play out once we get some games on them. But hopefully this gave you a better idea of what's coming next.
So first of all, what's
Thanks
our
for watching.
definition
See you guys
of
later.
Bad?